What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this best ball draft 555 on DraftKings. Want a ticket? So here we are, joined by my good buddy Sam Chowdhury, and we're going to talk best ball strategy. We're going to talk Week 1 NFL DFS. We're going to talk about how we got this ticket, and then we'll also talk a lot of just fantasy football and football excitement in general. So Sam, dude, how ready are you for football season?
Man, I can't wait. We're about 2 weeks away.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I've just been grinding out these best ball drafts. And I mean, it feels like a grind. I'm just sitting here drafting teams, but I'm just constantly thinking about DFS and the season coming around the corner. Like sometimes I feel like the offseason is flying by, but then when you get to the last month, it's just agonizing. Like I'm just ready for kickoff. And yeah, I mean, we're almost here.
Yeah, so a little bit of programming news. We talked right before we went live about the difficulty of going live with one of these drafts is you don't know if the moment you sign up for the contest, if you're going to be the 12th guy in and immediately you're in the draft room, or maybe you're going to be the first of 12 in. We got the wrong end of the stick here. I was the first of 12 into the contest, so we might be sitting here waiting for a little while before we can actually start drafting. But in the meantime, why don't we just keep talking football? And if anyone wants to jump into the live chat over on YouTube, you can drop any questions, comments that you have. It can be best ball strategy, it can be fantasy football strategy, it can be basically anything you want. Just we're here to talk some shop and have some fun. So
Yeah, this definitely might take a minute too. Honestly, I might quote tweet real quick and get people to join. Because honestly, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if this just doesn't fill today.
We're up to 2 entrants, so we got 2 now.
But yeah, no. But before we were talking about, why don't you tell them about how you won the 555 ticket?
PGA. It's been a fun PGA season. So every single week, they have these $9 satellites on DraftKings, and I believe there's 72 people. So if you're first of 72, you win a 555 ticket, and there are tickets available for 555 PGA contests, for NFL best ball, sometimes even for MLB contests. It just depends on the time of year, but they always have these sorts of satellites running. And then once that 555 opened up for best ball, it's like they were just tossing as many of those satellites in to each PGA slate as possible. And it's, as I said, it's been a really fun PGA season. So I won a couple of them, and here we are. I've already used one of them in a slow draft, and then I thought, you know what, I want to do a fast draft for the other one, and might as well have you join me and have some fun with it.
Yeah, and you said you're not even spending any money out of your pocket for these best ball drafts. I mean, that's insane. Because, I mean, for me, I mean, it's obviously all coming out of my pocket, so it's kind of nice too. Like, I guess last year was actually the first time that I actually had a profitable best ball season without an actual takedown, because they were giving the prizes out for the regular season advancements. And I think I had like 10 or 12 teams finish in the leaderboard of the regular season. So like at that point, like heading into the playoffs, like it was pretty much just like house money, because like I already profited. And then now whatever I win in the playoffs is just coming back to me. But I mean, obviously we don't have that anymore with the regular season prizes. So yeah, I mean, it will be nice because obviously the teams that do advance, you get your money back. But I mean, for you, I mean, that's awesome. It's just really no risk, all reward at that point. So, but I mean, there's nothing like it.
I have the 2 555 tickets, and then I'll probably end up with something like 1,500 entered into best ball. And I've just been using crowns. You know, I play enough PGA and stuff that I've had crowns. And whenever I get enough for a draft, I just toss it in there. And then, the tickets, I started doing satellites for other PGA contests, for other MLB contests earlier this year. And that strategy, I think, has completely changed the way that I play DraftKings. It's changed my approach, and all for the better, I think. And I also find it a lot more fun.
Yeah, I'm excited to try that out for NFL. Honestly, I should just be blindly using those GPP scores just to enter some PGA myself, because I mean, it's agonizing not playing really DFS. So I mean, I'll jump in, play some MOB here and there, but not having that consistent routine of just like getting prepared for DFS and whatnot. But yeah, I'm super excited to give it a shot. Me and you will definitely both be tackling the articles, dissecting the GPP scores. So that'll be a lot of fun. But yeah, I mean, I can't wait.
As we wait around here, we do have our first question. As you said, Sam, I don't know exactly when this is going to fill. I haven't done any fast 555 drafts, so I don't know how quickly they fill. It might take a while. We might even have to just like hang out for half an hour and then come back tonight or something. But in the meantime, we've got a question here. Besides Kyron Williams and Blake Corum, what would be your favorite handcuff? I'll let you answer this first because I'm going to give a much longer response where I talk about my favorite best ball strategy.
Yeah, so this is kind of weird. So my highest exposure right now is Rico Dowdle, and my average ADP is I just looked at I looked at this 2 or 3 days ago. It was 134.5. So I'm almost maxed out. I think I'm at 138 entries right now, so almost maxed out. So yeah, my average exposure was about in the mid 130s. He's all the way up to like 112, 115-ish right now. So, and he goes ahead of Zeke right now. So I don't know if I can call him the handcuff, but I guess all of draft season, that was my handcuff. Like he was going like around after Zeke, and it was like he was going after guys like Zach Charbonnet, and like pretty much these handcuffs that I wasn't sure if they'd have if they were just contingent values, but I felt pretty confident that Rico Dowdle could be the 1A, 1B in that backfield and the handcuffs. So I guess what I am looking for is ideally I'd like to get those handcuffs that I think can have standalone value and just not a lot of competition. They get all the work. So if Rico Dowdle isn't the handcuff, I mean, I would just say play the Dallas backfield because that's one thing that I'm doing now. Now Zeke's falling. He's behind Dowdle. So he's pretty much going where Dowdle has been all off season. So right now, if you want to call Zeke the handcuff, I'm just grabbing all of Zeke right now. I mentioned Zach Charbonnet. He's another guy that a lot of people thought that this would sort of be like a committee split backfield. And Charbonnet was, I mean, I don't think he was ever pricey. I just didn't get a lot of them because, again, Rico Dowdle's my highest exposure guy, and he was going below Charbonnet. But recently I've been getting a lot of Charbonnet because I don't think it's going to be a 50-50 split. Like I said, I think a lot of people assume, but I think he can get 30-ish%. And we already saw that he wasn't great as a standalone back, but he was capable of being a standalone back. And I am definitely buying into the Seattle offense. I think it's going to be a big bounce back year for JSN. Tyler Lockett, yeah, kind of fell off, but I mean, even he's pretty cheap. And when you get really squeezed out in these wide receiver rooms, I don't mind tacking on Lockett. But just in general, I do think this Seattle offense is being undervalued. So Charbonnet is a guy that I've been getting a lot recently. Jaleel McLaughlin, he's probably like my third or fourth guy. He's been rising up a lot through the but he's not really your handcuff that if Javonte were to go down, he gets all of the volume. He's a 3-down back. You'd see probably be a split between him and Estime. Not sure what's going to happen with Perine. I think he gets cut. But regardless, I think he's just great for your 0 RB rooms where you're not really trying to hit a home run. You're just trying to get points there. And maybe you have a Tyler Algier or something, and maybe he's the guy that you're banking on if Bijan Robinson gets hurt. Maybe he slots into your RB1, but you just want to get as many guys. You want different archetypes of running backs, and Jaleel McLaughlin is sort of that safe floor, probably low ceiling play, but he just fits a lot of build. Maybe just a bye week filler, and he had been pretty cheap all season long. So yeah, he's another guy that I really like.
So Michael, I think one thing that would help is if you let us know if this question is fantasy related, best ball related, or kind of all of the above, because my best ball thoughts here, I think this is by far and away my favorite strategy for best ball, which is drafting teammates outside of stacks. And that can be running backs together. It can be receivers together. The whole concept of a handcuff, I think, has changed a lot over the years because we don't see the bell cow running back anywhere near as often today as we used to. And so far more often, you still see the word handcuff thrown around for backfields where both guys have a defined role. And those defined roles are usually different from one another. So, for example, we can think of Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery last year. Like Montgomery was the goal line guy. So when Montgomery wasn't scoring, one of the ways that he wasn't scoring was because Jahmyr Gibbs would score from 30 yards out and he wouldn't get that chance. Or it'd become 3rd and goal and they'd bring in Gibbs because he's running a route and he would catch the touchdown. And so there's this very distinct inverse correlation between those two guys where when one does really well, the other is less likely to do well. And the reason why that can be so valuable in the regular season is because it diminishes the chance that you have like two guys with great scores on your bench one week, and then you needed those two scores the next week, where it can be so frustrating where you're looking at your best ball lineup and you see two scores under 10 points. You think, damn, if I could only take the two great scores that were on my bench last week and sub them in this week, it would be so great. Well, when you have that inverse correlation on your team, then it tends to balance out the amount of spike weeks you have one week to the next. And it can be super, super powerful in the regular season, but then it's also really beneficial in the postseason, because that's the way you kind of get these low owned guys in the second round. Because think about it, like one of the most counterintuitive, I guess, if you will, things about best ball, especially in the playoffs, is when you are looking at your team, let's say round one, or you advance through round one of the playoffs and you're looking at your team in round two, your best chance of having a low owned guy who could do really well and like just have that guy advance you is for that guy to have been really bad the week prior when you advance. And it's hard to do that, right? It's hard to have your high upside guys perform poorly in round one, but also advance. And one of the ways that you can do that is by getting inversely correlated guys. So we'll talk a lot about that on the stream, because it's as I said, one of the strategies that I use the most. And I'm starting to get a little bit optimistic we're going to be able to draft soon. We're up to 4 out of 12. So it's not moving quite as slowly as I would have, or as it could have gone.
To your point, I've actually written a decent amount about it too. When you think of, like, for example, we could look at Philly, like Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts. You look at those two. Jalen Hurts doesn't throw to his running backs. They're probably going to be the most negatively correlated running back quarterback pairing. Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry would probably be another one this season. But yeah, in a single game, they're not correlated. You're not going to go into a DFS lineup pairing Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, Jalen Hurts, Barkley most weeks. But in best ball, the stacking correlation is across the season. So if Philly's offense does well, if Baltimore's offense does well, I mean, Baltimore, we just saw, Gus Edwards scored 20 touchdowns. Lamar Jackson was one of the guys you need in the playoffs. He had multiple QB1 finishes, but it's just across the season, the offense is going to be doing well. So that's definitely one that I like. I mean, if we look at, I think this was 2 seasons ago, Pat Corain's winning team. It had Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones. Saquon Barkley was RB1 or RB2 one week. It was a 3 QB build. Daniel Jones didn't crack the lineup. He just had a mad game. Next game, Saquon Barkley doesn't do anything. Daniel Jones, a low advanced guy. He pops off, brings wide receivers that aren't drafted at all. Like who was it? It was the Chiefs wide receiver last year. You know what I'm talking about? Isaiah Hodgins was one of them, and I can't remember who it was.
Richie James.
Yeah, Richie James. These guys weren't drafted at all, so it doesn't matter. You didn't need his wide receivers. But regardless, Saquon Barkley didn't even crack his lineup. Like, that was his first or second round pick. Didn't even make his lineup. Daniel Jones, QB1 on the week. That's the negative correlation. Saquon Barkley pushed him through week 15. Then Daniel Jones was the guy you needed to have. So I'm definitely a big fan of taking on those negative correlations that, again, in a single game, it probably doesn't correlate, but throughout the season, it will correlate because you're just betting on the offense. And in our guide, Alex wrote a couple really good pieces of advanced stacking, general stacking, just pretty much hitting on it. And all my articles, I make sure to hyperlink it before, because I'll give a brief synopsis about it. But yeah, just make sure you read that if you can.
Yeah, I'll also read, I wrote a couple weeks ago, the overlooked best ball strategy that you need to be using. Just Google that with FTN, and you'll find it pretty easily. There was a free one to read, so anyone can read it. Still at 4 of 12. So why don't we run through some of our other favorite running back pairings, and we can even get into some wide receiver pairings and kind of preview who we're targeting in this actual draft once we're able to get to it. But I'll start with some running back pairings that I have a ton of. Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. It's become a little bit tougher to get those together, because it used to be like, regardless of where you were in the actual draft order, you could take Najee Harris and then take Warren either a pick or two later. Now you have to almost be at the turn where they're both available in the next 5 picks, and you have 2 of those next 5 picks, something like that, to do it. But Chase Brown and Zach Moss is another one I've gone after a lot. Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson. I still think Gibbs and Montgomery are pretty solid in that regard. Obviously, you're pushing it a little bit the higher Gibbs goes, because part of the thesis of taking him at that 1-2 turn now is that he's going to score more this year than he did last year. So that hurts that pairing a little bit. But any others that really stand out to you here, Sam?
Yeah, similar to the Gibbs Montgomery. I mean, Devon H and Raheem Mostert. We just saw this last year.
Yeah.
If you want to just take out per game, if you want to filter it, which you can do this on FTN splits, if you filter just games where A-Chain saw, I'm going to say I did this myself, a 35% snap share. Like they're both ripping off RB top 5 RB per game stats. So we already saw that in a small sample last year. So that's one. Even though A-Chain now you got to take late second, early third. I mean, I really can't understand Mostert's ADP. Like, is it this low because he's old? Because you think he's gonna get hurt? Because like I don't really have like a justification for why it's so low, but that's definitely one I like a lot. Another one that's similar to the Steelers one. It's getting kind of harder because as these guys are merging closer together, the Titans one, that's one that I like a lot. I'm 100% buying that this is going to be a complete 50-50 split. Yeah. And even if you just take both of these guys at 50-50 split, they project better in their ADP, both of them, for me right now. So you can double tap, or if you can get Pollard and just if you can, you probably need Spears to fall a little bit now, but that is one that you can get if you have to reach on one of them. So be it. Again, they project a lot better in their ADP already for me. So that's one that I like. The Broncos one is interesting. I've been pairing Javonte with Jaleel, Javonte with Estime, Jaleel with Estime. I think you can pair those all different kinds of ways because, like I said before, I think Jaleel has a locked-in role as a pass catcher. So I don't think his role is going to change much with the Javonte injury. And if Javonte goes down, I think it'll be Jaleel and Estime just sort of splitting it. And Estime just pretty much, I don't think he'd get the same snap share as Javonte, but I think Estime is going to have standalone value, and he's just a free pick in round 18. I think he is going to get some goal line work. Just from what I've read in the beats, that maybe he might not. It looked originally, I remember they predicted the split would be 60 Javonte, 30 for Estime, but now it looks more like 60-40 just between Jaleel and Javonte. But regardless, I think Estime is going to have some usable weeks with everyone healthy, and then he would be the clear handcuff if Javonte goes down. But I think you can mix and match all three of those guys, and that's pretty cheap too. Even though Javonte is rising, I think it's fine. I think he still has more room to rise, so that's a pretty solid one. Again, with the Cowboys, I think it is going to be a true 1A, 1B. I don't think anyone's going to run away with this job, but it is kind of nice. I'm hoping that Zeke keeps falling, and the further this gap goes, the more I want to hammer Zeke. It is kind of hard because I think Rico Dowdle might be getting a price out of my range. Again, like I said, in the 115 range. Now he's like almost right next to Devin Singletary. And Devin Singletary is gross, but I think I feel a lot better about his volume compared to Rico Dowdle. So if you can get, I guess you need Dowdle to fall a little bit. That's one that I've had a lot throughout the offseason, but I think that's definitely viable as well.
I don't have a ton of Dowdle in large part because Zeke is actually my highest owned running back. So it's funny that we're on opposite sides there. My thought there is I do think they're going to split work, but I see Zeke getting like the vast majority of high value snaps and high value targets and touches, where I see him being the goal line back, and they love the way he protects so much on passing downs that I think he'll be the guy out there on a lot of passing downs too. So even though I think that Dowdle might compete with him for the most touches on the team, Zeke's touches I just think are going to be so much more valuable. But some other duos that I have a ton of, James Cook, Ray Davis might be my favorite one. Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins. Curious your thoughts there, because Dobbins was going like 160s for a while, and now he's up into the 130s. So I'm not taking hardly any Dobbins anymore, but do you think there's reason for all this steam?
So I'm playing catch up now because he's a guy that I was completely fading, and now I am adding Dobbins because I am starting to believe this. And I mean, I'm an Ohio State fan, so I'm kind of biased. Like I've loved Dobbins like all throughout OSU, all throughout Baltimore, is waiting for this guy to be healthy. And I mean, you look at his contract, like I wasn't confident that he was going to make the team. I thought there was a chance that he could start on the PUP list. And then when he opened training camp on the PUP list, that was first when I started paying attention. Like, this is kind of weird. He's running drills, completely looks normal. All the beats are saying he looks great. So
Mhm.
I kind of have started to buy back into Dobbins, but I mean, he might be going earlier on DraftKings, but he's still at 145, consistently still gets to 150, 155. So I have been getting a lot of them there. And again, that's one that I feel like I was wrong on. And I'm just trying to play catch up there. So I'm definitely buying into it now. And I think there is still a huge chance that he doesn't make it through the season. I mean,
Mhm.
we've seen it all throughout his career, but when you're that late, anyways, a lot of these guys are dart throws. And you mentioned Gibson. Gibson's also one of my highest owned guys. So it's pretty easy for me. Like, I don't need to add to my Gibson bags. Like, why don't I just start taking more Dobbins here? Just because, again, I mean, you want to make a bet on roster construction and the thesis of the handcuff. Like, you don't want to predict that the handcuff, like, which RB is going to go down. So you just kind of want to diversify your portfolio there. And that's what I'm doing. Again, just playing catch up there. And then, so, I mean, you get to that Dobbins here where I feel like the Dobbins, Algier, I mentioned Jaleel. These are the handcuffs that have standalone value. So they're more in the mid to late round. So they go a little bit higher. And then later on, you get the Braylon Allens. These more are running backs that need an injury likely to crack your lineup. So it is a guy, again, Dobbins, he just fits a lot of builds, especially 0 RB when you want a floor of points with the ceiling of them taking over the role. And I definitely think you can pair Gus and Dobbins together because when we
Mhm.
saw Greg Roman in Baltimore, I mean, this was his plan to run 1A, 1B, with Dobbins being the 1A and Gus being the 1B in Baltimore. So I think ideally, I think he would like to do that. And I think they could run the ball 40 times a game. So both Gus and Dobbins can be your RB1, RB2 multiple weeks. So I definitely feel great pairing those two guys together.
I think you said it well, where you're going for guys with standalone value who would still benefit from the traditional sense of, a handcuff if the other guy goes down, but they have standalone value, and you're also getting the benefit of just roster construction advantage by taking two of those guys together. Two others for me, Eckler and Brian Robinson, I think are solid. Same sort of deal. And in fact, those two have the also like the very distinct inverse correlation where one is probably better in a positive game script and the other's better in a negative game script when they have to throw the ball a lot more. So that's one I really like. And then not exactly the same sort of thing. Well, actually, I'll give one other first. James Conner, Trey Benson, I think is really solid. Finally, the last one I'll give. This is a bit of a different sort of bet, but Khalil Herbert, Roshan Johnson, essentially betting that DeAndre Swift is not worth the draft capital that people are spending on him right now, and that he will be supplanted on the depth chart. Because as an Eagles fan last year, I was thoroughly unimpressed after the first few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I personally am okay with Swift, so I actually have found myself. I mean, you take like this thing about draft as if you're right. When you're spending
Mhm.
a mid-round pick on Swift and you get Khalil Herbert in round 15, Roshan Johnson in my room just doesn't get drafted, so you can use him on your last pick. Like, there's no way DeAndre Swift is gonna be a workhorse back. He's a
Mhm.
fine pick at ADP if you just project him being the 1A, and then if you project Khalil Herbert and Roshan Johnson to mix in, which I definitely do. So I think, I mean, I think the same thing that I said about the Denver guys, I think you can mix and match these guys, and I think they're all going to have standalone value. I think Herbert would be the clear early down runner if something were to happen to Swift, or if Swift is just bad like he has been most of his career. But I mean, I just really like the Chicago offense in general, so I just want pieces of it. Like
Mhm.
Khalil Herbert and Roshan Johnson with no Chicago correlation, I'm completely fine double tapping those as my RB5, RB6 to close out drafts. Because again, I think this offense is going to score a lot of points. I know DeAndre Swift got paid well, but he's never been a workhorse. They kind of tried it in Philly, and I mean that was like the nut scenario for him. The best offensive line in the league. He was terrible on the goal line still, so I definitely think Khalil Herbert is going to be a big guy that they use on the goal line. I think they'll try and use Swift, but we'll see how it goes. And if you get Roshan and Khalil Herbert, you still have the out that Khalil Herbert does get traded. So, and
Yeah.
from what I've read with the Beats, like it seems like they really want this to be a 1A, 1B with Swift and Roshan Johnson. They'd like to move Herbert if they can, but if Herbert's on the team, he's just going to have a big role. That's what I've been reading. So it feels like you can't really go wrong picking those Chicago guys from what the plan is. And I feel like it's only upside. If Herbert gets traded, it's really great for both Swift and Roshan. Just get a two-man backfield there, and you'd imagine Khalil Herbert goes to a better situation. So you just have a lot of outs in that scenario.
Yeah, I kind of view it as Swift is being drafted as a ceiling, and the other two are being drafted at their floors. So I'll just take the other two. Shout out to Michael for the question. Michael, if you have any others, drop them in there. Anybody else with questions, drop those in the live chat over on YouTube as well. In the meantime, why don't we jump and talk some receivers? We can talk our favorite stacks or our favorite receiver pairings outside of stacks, because I think those, some people, I think, have really caught on to this idea of taking running back teammates. I very rarely see people taking receiver teammates outside of stacks unless they get sniped for the stack that they were going after. But I think that too is a really, really viable strategy. So we can talk some of our favorite pairings there. So Sam, why don't you kick us off with maybe a couple stacks that you're targeting at the start of drafts that that these are a couple receivers that I think are undervalued. The quarterback's undervalued. I feel good every time I leave a draft with this stack.
Yeah, it's definitely got to be, I think, by a wide gap, the Philly stack. I mean, AJ Brown, for one, I think he's a great pick at 9 where he typically goes. And just with the way the underdog lobbies is, I mean, you can get AJ. I mean, recently, you don't get it much, but AJ Brown at pick 9, and then you come back whoever you want in the second round. And then I actually got Devontae Smith to fall in the mid to late third. And then no one's touching Jalen Hurts. That's one thing, is you do see a lot of these casual rooms that someone's just going to grab a naked Hurts. But I'd say probably 80% of the time, if I have AJ Brown, Jalen Hurts typically comes back. And then if I'm picking at the top, I think you can take Devontae Smith as early as the top of the third round. But again, like I said, sometimes you can get him mid to late. And Devontae Smith used to be in the back of the third to the fourth round when Best Ball Mania opened up. So I have a lot of my drafts then. So Devontae Smith just naturally became one of my highest exposed guys, just because he was near the fourth round. Like, there's no way I was going to pass up fourth round Devontae Smith. So I just really like the prices on these guys. And Jalen Hurts is my QB1. I mean, he goes at QB2, so that's not some bold call or something. But this is probably the first year that we are getting a guy. Josh Allen, even, he's a QB1. Still goes to the back of the third, often the fourth round. So I do think these elite QBs are being discounted a little too much just from what we saw last year. Just because, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, these guys were going in the back of the second round. And just because they didn't significantly separate from the field, now they're going all the way in the fourth. So I do think that's pretty exploitable and one that I've been taking advantage of. And in best ball, you can pile up depth at running back and wide receiver and make up enough points on hitting on these ceiling weeks. But I do think it's still a lot harder to do at quarterbacks. Even though quarterback is the most replaceable position, I think these elite guys are being too discounted. And it just naturally works that I'm just super high on this Philly offense. So I'd say that's my number one right now.
Yeah, I love the call. I think one of the things that you mentioned that I think is we can't repeat enough is know the draft room that you're in. Whether you're on Underdog, whether you're on DraftKings, know the draft room that you're in. Because, as you said, the more casual the draft room, the more likely the field is to kind of draft guys that don't necessarily make sense for their team. Whereas when you get into like a 5-5-5 DraftKings best ball, it's far more likely that no one's taking Jalen Hurts unless they already have either AJ Brown or Devontae Smith. So, of course, if he fell to the fifth, then maybe you'd see that. But yeah, I think it's always a really good thing to keep in the back of your mind because it informs every decision that you make throughout the draft. I very much agree, by the way, on the Philly and AJ Brown call. Hurts is my third most popular quarterback. Allen's actually my most popular. He's not my favorite to draft, though. If I have my way, it's AJ Brown early and then Jalen Hurts. But when I can't get AJ Brown, I typically go to Josh Allen because I think that some of Allen's targets are just way too underdrafted. Like Curtis Samuel is one of my favorite picks on the entire draft board. I haven't gotten Allen with Kincaid as often as I would like, but I also sort of feel like there's an inverse correlation between Kincaid and Samuel, so I'm a little bit okay with that since I'm taking so much Samuel. Do you have strong feelings on Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, those guys? Because I don't, so I've just kind of been taking them when they slip a little bit, and I have Josh Allen, but haven't really had interest in either of those guys elsewhere.
Yeah, well, Josh Allen's my number 2. Pretty much what I said earlier about the quarterbacks being mispriced, especially the elite ones. And I've probably changed my tune a lot on Keon Coleman. Of the wide receivers, Curtis Samuel is by far my highest exposed guy, just because his price, he used to be right next to Khalil Shakir, and I strongly preferred Curtis Samuel. When he shot up to the 80s, I hadn't been getting much of him. I mean, he was just super close to Keon Coleman. And at that point, I was like, I'm just going to bet on the unknown rookie here and take him. But I was sort of just clicking him almost really if I just had Josh Allen. But now I think just in a vacuum, he's just a straight up good pick, just from what we saw in the preseason. On top of Curtis Samuel now dealing with the turf toe, questionable in week 1. It is a lingering injury, so I would definitely be backing off of Curtis Samuel. I was, like I said, when he started steaming up, but my main concern was this is going to be a rotation, and I have no confidence if Keon Coleman was going to be the guy in 2 wide sets. Curtis Samuel, I had the same concern, but I didn't care much about because they were already using him in gadget stuff, and he was going to get his scheme touches. And you just look at his role in Brady's offense. I mean, when they had DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel wasn't a regular guy on 2 wide sets, but he had 1,000 scrimmage yards just because the way they used him. And I mean, that was it. I mean, CMC got hurt, yeah, but either way, we saw what his role was, as he could be sort of playing the backfield as a running back, get the jet sweep. So he's not a guy that I cared if he was going to play 2 wide sets. I thought that there was a chance that he can play, because in his career, he has been a guy that can play in 11 personnel, 12 personnel, all kinds of stuff, but I didn't care as much. Keon Coleman, just with how high he was going, how high relative to underdog all these rookies are steamed up. So even though Keon Coleman was steamed up, I mean, he was still going behind Ladd McConkey, who's, the same bet. He's a 2nd-round draft pick, probably a much worse, I mean, definitely a worse offense. But regardless, he was sort of just a guy that I was clicking at. I didn't want to completely fade him, but sort of restricted it to Josh Allen, or if I just felt like clicking him because I don't have enough of him. But yeah, recently I have been getting a lot of him because we saw he was the only guy that, I guess the second game with Matt Collins were the clear 2 guys on 2 wide sets. So if you guarantee me that he's a guy that's going to be on the field on 2 wide sets and just doesn't leave the field, yeah, I'm definitely going to take him. The Josh Allen Kincaid, yeah, you mentioned it. It is a lot harder to get now. That's another reason why I had a lot more Josh Allen. Kincaid was a little bit cheaper than the elite tight end, so you could have reached a little bit on Kincaid and not go too far out of ADP to stack him with Josh Allen. It has been harder now, but I wrote about it earlier, and this is definitely a lot better on DraftKings. Dawson Knox is a great pick in round 19 to 20 because with Dawson Knox and Kincaid active last year, they ran 2 tight end sets at the 3rd highest rate in the league, and that includes games where Dawson Knox left, Dalton Kincaid was banged up, and even the first half of the season, Dawson Knox played twice as many snaps as Dalton Kincaid, and I don't think that had anything to do with Dalton Kincaid's talent. I think that was just them working the rookie in. I think ideally that they want this to be both these guys be on the field as much as possible, and that's why I was so adamant about wanting to see who's going to be the wide receivers on 2 wide sets, because I don't know how much 3 wide they are going to use this season. And remember, before they drafted Dalton Kincaid, they just signed Dawson Knox to this huge deal. Obviously, they weren't out on him because they just signed him and they happened to draft Dalton Kincaid. And I think that was more just with them missing out on the wide receiver run and them desperately needing a pass catcher. So I think they really do want these guys on the field. And when you're drafting Dawson Knox, you're betting on a touchdown anyways. And what better way than bet on a touchdown than drag it with his quarterback, which is another thing we always talk about in DFS. I mean, all these shows we talk about, when we get to tight end, we're constantly saying, whoever a quarterback is, just tack on the tight end with it. So Dawson Knox is completely free on underdog. You got to take him in round 18, but DraftKings round 19, round 20, I think he's a great pick there.
Twice we have gotten up to 7 entrants. We have dropped all the way back to 5. So we'll hang out here for a little while longer. Hopefully we get some steam in this contest. If not, we'll probably jump off and maybe we'll be able to rejoin later. I certainly will. I don't know if Sam would be able to join me in that. But in terms of Kincaid, I think one of the reasons why I haven't gotten a lot of him is because I'm just targeting George Kittle so often on DraftKings, and he's going like 2 rounds later than Kincaid. That gap has narrowed a little bit of late, but not as much as I think it should.
That just flipped for me recently. I used to have more Knox And then yeah, it flipped. I think my highest owned is I think Juwan Johnson, which I mean, thankfully I was just packing my bags with him on the PUP list. He was in round 18,
Yeah.
so it was just an auto click. But yeah, I think Kittle is my second now. But it's funny because Dalton Kincaid was above just because he was the latest of the elite tier for a long
Mhm.
time. And since he's risen, I just haven't been clicking. Like, if you ask me to pick straight up, like, yeah, I'm definitely taking the McBride, Laporta, these guys ahead of him. But there was a decent gap. The fact that it's gotten closer, I don't feel as comfortable clicking Kincaid. But you mentioned it really makes no sense. Deebo Samuel shoots midway through the to the
Yeah.
second round. Brandon Ayuk drops midway through the third, and George Kittle just does not move at all. Like,
Didn't
I
move
have
at all.
no explanation for this. Like, this is a guy that I mean, he had 1,000 receiving yards last year, led all tight ends in receiving yards. Brandon Ayuk missed one game. Deebo Samuel, I want to say 3 games, and he still had over 1,000 receiving yards, and then he just doesn't move. Makes no
Mhm.
sense at all to me. But
He
yeah, I
also
just
has a
started hammering
history
that.
of having some huge games when at least one of those guys is out. So yeah, I've been all over Kittle. Here's a funny one. Let's go to receivers for a second. And I've got two guys that are tied for my highest exposure. One of them is a guy who doesn't even get drafted in a lot of DraftKings drafts. So even in the 20 rounds, he should be a starting slot receiver on one of the best offenses in football. Can you guess who it is?
Starting slot receiver. It's not Justin Watson, is it?
No, no.
Okay. All right.
Here's another hint. He's got a history of making some big plays and being a fairly explosive player. He also makes mistakes, but he's got some explosive playability in him.
It's not Nelson Aguilar isn't a slot. Is it him?
Yeah, it's Aguilar.
It is. Okay,
Mhm.
no, that's a great pick. He's a clear wide receiver 3 that doesn't get drafted. But no, that's a
He
great pick.
was, he had very solid games last year as the fourth guy on the depth chart, and now he's the third guy on the depth chart. Should play more. Now he's already has a season of establishing himself as somebody who can make plays on that team and that offense. So yeah, I feel really, really good about that. I think one of the biggest dangers with the pick is that they too could go with a lot of 2 tight end sets, particularly after how good Likely looked last season. So maybe he's going to play only as often as he did last year, but that would still make him a pretty solid pick. So especially when I take Lamar Jackson, I am really locked in on Aguilar late. And then the other guy that I have at 29% tied for first with Aguilar is Hollywood Brown. And I've been taking Hollywood Brown in almost every single draft lately because he's fallen so far since that injury, and it's not that severe of an injury. And I tweeted it the other day, like at least on DraftKings, he's now going where Sky Moore was being drafted a year ago. Hollywood Brown is infinitely better. I think this offense is going to be just spectacular. And then I love pairing Hollywood Brown with Xavier Worthy and just saying, you know what, the two of them together might be good for a big play touchdown a game. I'll have all of them.
Yeah, I think he's my second is I tweeted this earlier. Honestly, I think I feel really similar about the way you feel about Hollywood Brown. I'd imagine that you were already drafting Hollywood Brown
Mm-hmm.
before the injury, and then you're just taking him, you're just packing your bags at a cheaper price now.
Yep.
That's sort of what I've been doing with DeAndre Hopkins. He's a guy that I was already drafting before the injury. As soon as the injury happened, I was sick. Like, I was like, oh, this is terrible for my exposure. And then I'm like, I'm gonna back off DeAndre Hopkins. Probably didn't draft him for a week. And then I look at the ADP. I mean, this guy's going in the 90s. So I'm still clicking. I'm like, at this point, like, I'm just like, my season's just gonna be. I mean, he's a ninth round pick now. Like, if my ninth round pick doesn't play, if he's just a complete bust, I don't care. You can survive with a ninth round bust. That's completely fine. So I just kept clicking him. He now is looking likely to play in week 1, and he's
Mm-hmm.
still just staying here in the 90s, which makes absolutely no sense to me. I mean, I still prefer him straight up to Calvin Ridley, and
Yeah.
this guy, like, I mean, I expect him to rise, but I don't know. Like, at this, like, he's like not rising at all. I'm seeing other guys move up and down the board. Marquise Brown, like, he's still going down the boards, which even him, like, he's still questionable for week 1. He's not even ruled out for week 1. So these guys, and I think if you're like me and you're rounding out your final entries, I mean, what better way to get leverage than buying guys at the cheapest price possible, especially with Hopkins getting news that he is going to play week 1. I really don't understand that. And another guy that I've just been hammering was Jalen Polk. He's a guy that my average ADP, I looked this up to, it was 151, and I think he's in the 120s now. And that's the guy that I've just been in on all offseason, and I already have a good portfolio of really cheap Jalen Polk, and I was just chasing him up the boards. And then he fell back down because he didn't get reps of the first string in any of the preseason games. But you look at all the beats. Number one, the first preseason game, they got Juju Smith-Schuster out there, and they end up releasing him the next day. So I don't even want to pay attention to the first week of the preseason. Second was kind of weird, but I think they wanted to get a lot of these guys with May and Jacoby. So I really wasn't paying attention to that. So I just kept clicking him. And even his ADP was, like I said, in the 120s. But even then, because consistently in my rooms, he would go down to 140. So he's another guy this past couple weeks. I just kept going back, kept clicking him. And it looks like we're getting more positive buzz that the clear top three are going to be Tyquan Thornton, Jalen Polk, and Demario Douglas. So I feel even better about that. And in general, I mean, he's just a top the second round rookie. And you have guys like I mentioned earlier, I'm more optimistic about Keon Coleman, but Keon Coleman, Lad McConkey, these guys are going the 6-7 turn. And Jalen Polk is going 30 plus spots after him, which is closer now. It used to be 40 to 50 spots after them with almost the same capital. And I know it's the Patriots offense. We're not going to get excited about the Patriots offense, but when these guys are picked right next to each other, like, do you really think there should be around a 50 pick gap around these two? Like, I definitely don't agree with that. I mean, it's actually more than that. Probably what he was around the 140s, and Vlad and Keon were in the mid 60s when BBM opened. So that was just a wild gap for me. And that's when I was completely fading second round rookies going in the mid 6th round. I just felt a lot more comfortable about clicking Jalen Polk. And I'm not going to act like I'm some college scout. I didn't know much about Polk, but I know he got great draft capital in a new regime. This regime picked Jalen Polk in their first draft. So just sort of betting on capital there. And I have liked what I have seen from him. So he's a guy that I've really been on. And another really gross one, which, funny enough, this was my highest exposure guy last year, and he's going to be up there for me again. And it's Adam Thielen. Like, what are we going to do this again with Adam Thielen? Like, I love Deontay Johnson. I'm hammering Deontay Johnson, but right now, from what I've seen, Xavier Legette isn't going to start to open the season, which, I mean, if you have Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, like, I'm not going to say he's going to get 200 targets again, but this is another guy that goes in the 160s to 170s when he was a wide receiver one. Like, I think we discounted him a little bit too much. And he's another guy where if you just want to look for a bye week filler, like, Adam Thielen is going to give you points. So it feels gross, but I am clicking him in the 160s to 170s where he's going.
I will push back on that one a little bit because the only argument for him a year ago was the volume, and it was there early, and he was putting up some big numbers. Pretty disappointing second half of the season, and now I can't even confidently say the volume's going to be there because I think the volume's going to Deontay. So I don't know about the Thielen pick, but we are in perfect agreement on DeAndre Hopkins. He's my third highest exposed receiver, and I like Hopkins so much now.
I want to ask you something, actually, because you talked about Nelson Aguilar.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that Rashad Bateman should be going ahead of Adam Thielen?
No.
Well, he does. He goes ahead of Adam Thielen.
Yeah. But I have 0 of Bateman and 0 of Thielen. So I
have 0 of Bateman, but man, that makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
Like, that's just a perfect comparison about, like, why are you clicking Rashad Bateman over Adam? Like I said, he's a bye week filler. I get in these rooms where, like, 3 of my 4 top wide receivers the same bye week. So I just think he's a perfect guy that's going to give you some points on your bye week. That's all I want.
That's a good point. Yeah, he probably has a floor around 8 most weeks. So I'm with you on that point. But that's the only one that I'll give you on the Thielen train. But let's talk Hopkins a little bit because I think Hopkins has become the best value in draft rooms between he and Hollywood Brown. And as you pointed out, it's basically the exact same story. Guy has an injury, guy falls like crazy, We find out that the injury isn't anywhere near as serious as it could have been, and yet the ADP doesn't rise back to where it was previously. So I like Hopkins so much now that I have even started to take Calvin Ridley, who I think is being pretty dramatically overdrafted. One, in the sense that maybe I'm wrong about Ridley and maybe he is just this good and should be drafted where he is, but also because it's setting up some Will Levis Tennessee stacks. So what are your thoughts there? And maybe talk about it specific to Ridley and the Titans, but also just more broadly, like how likely are you to reach for some receivers because you feel good about the stack as a whole?
So Ridley's a guy that I've probably done 400 drafts, and I have 0 Ridley so far. And that's just me again, going back to my love of Hopkins. I mean, even before the injury, he was way cheaper than Ridley. And I just can't stomach picking a guy in the early rounds when I think their teammate is better than him and he's significantly cheaper. So that's my one thing. But I was talking about, I had to check my exposure. The guy I have right by Kittle and Juwan Johnson is Chigakonkwo. He's another guy who's free. And if I have DeAndre Hopkins, I mentioned earlier, I love the Titans back. Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears are both near the top of my exposure. So I'm not even intentionally stacking. If I like draft on my rankings on BPA, I'm naturally getting Hopkins, one of these Titans backs, and then I'm naturally clicking Will Levis. And then round 18, Chigakonkwo, he doesn't even get drafted in a lot of leagues. So he's just free in round 18. And I mean, these guys in round 18, you're just doing your best to avoid dead roster spots. I don't love Chig. Like, I'm not going to try and hype up Chig. I think he's going to be around a 60% route participation rate guy, which isn't great. But I mean, round 18, a guy that's going to see the field 60% of the time. You look at the other guys down there, like, I have no idea if these guys are even going to play. Like, Troy Franklin, he was going like 40 spots ahead of Chig, and he's probably not going to see the field. That's how all these round 18 guys are. But if I have Will Levis, Hopkins, the Titans running back, I'll just tack on Chig to make the stack there. And he is one of these late QBs where if you squint, you can definitely see him giving you a top 15 finish in a ceiling season. But he's definitely going to have some spike weeks. He's definitely going to crack your lineup, even with the higher end quarterback. So that's a stack that I've really been gravitating toward. It's just, like I said, it's more natural than anything. Like, I don't have to go out of my way to stack these Titans. I just like a lot of these cheap guys. And Ridley is the only guy that I've sort of it's sort of the odd man out for all the Titans for me.
I really liked one point that you threw in there, which on Underdog, when you only have 18 roster spots, those last couple picks are a lot about just making sure you don't have any dead weight on the roster, making sure you have as many guys contributing to your scores as possible. Whereas on DraftKings, where you have 20, I almost think you're able to hunt a little bit more for that really low-owned guy who can give you a spike week in the postseason or can end up having a much larger role than he's going to start the year with. Looking for the Puka if Puka happened in week 12 instead of week 1 last year. So another, I think, really key distinction: know your draft room, know your site, and what you're trying to get out of each pick.
Right. Yeah, completely agree. And it would be nice if the Underdog, they had this is actually funny. So they had the big board contest, and that was 20 rounds. And I have 1K on Greg Dortch because he was my round 20 pick, which I can't fathom that he's like a round 16 pick guy now, and he wasn't even drafted in the big board. And all that's happened since the big board is they drafted Marvin Harrison Jr., they added Zay Jones, and for some reason he jumps up 3 rounds after they add all these. It makes no sense to me, but I feel pretty good about the closing line value I got with Greg Dortch. He's another one of my favorite clicks. Like, he's just a guy that's just locked into a role. And I mean, he's a beast when he just plays 40% of snaps. And I mean, it's just been all positive buzz throughout the offseason. So he's another guy I really like.
I had gotten super excited because we got up to 9 entrants. We have fallen all the way back to 6 entrants. So I don't know when this is going to happen. Maybe what we'll do is if we get through like a full hour, we're 49 minutes into this stream already. If we get to an hour and we're still stuck on 6 or 7, maybe we'll just turn this into a strategy show and post it that way for people to watch. And we'll try again on the live draft stream either later today or some other time in the near future. But again, if anyone has more questions, drop those in the YouTube chat. We will answer any strategy question. let's switch gears a little bit as we wait. I don't know about you. I'm pretty damn excited for week 1. Have you looked at the pricing at all yet?
I have a little bit. Honestly, the one of my fatal flaws is I'll look at pricing and I'm gonna land on a stack, and no matter what I see, no matter what news I get throughout the week, no matter what research I do, like the stack that I saw as soon as I open salary, it just gets stuck in my mind to the point where nothing's gonna change my mind. Like this is gonna be a stack that I'm running no matter what, and I'm kind of falling into it, which I mean, this is if this is chalk, I'm not gonna play this in a single lineup, but Sam Darnold is a great play in week 1. Am I wrong? Like,
No, you're not wrong. It's funny because I think there are a lot of quarterbacks that you can make a really good case for. Darnold's definitely one of them. Jaden Daniels, Anthony Richardson. I'm sure Richardson's going to be among the most popular. Although it's a little bit tougher to figure out who you would stack with him. So honestly, that's part of why I think week 1 is going to be so interesting, is because there are a lot of guys you can make a really strong case for, but there's also like every single guy that you can make a strong case for, you can make a pretty strong case against, at least in regards to the stack as a whole, not necessarily just the quarterback. But yeah, it makes for a really interesting week 1. But the main reason why I brought up week 1 is because every year I think that one of the strategies that we can best use in week 1 is just studying ADP throughout best ball. We know that best ball ADP has flaws, but it's pretty efficient across the board. And then we get to week 1, and of course there are certain guys who you're drafting high in best ball, not because you expect them to be the guy in week 1, but because you expect him to be the guy by the time week 10, 11, 12 comes around. But we can look at ADP each year and say, hey, this guy's being drafted, like everybody has confidence in him. We get to week 1, he's in a pretty good matchup. He's cheap, and yet he's really low owned. So I think in that regard, has anyone stood out to you on DraftKings yet where their price on DraftKings just doesn't align with where they're being drafted, either on Underdog or DraftKings?
I haven't really even like looked through salary much, so I can't really answer that. So yeah, I'd have to look back at that. But I mean, that has been a thing for week 1 is, I mean, if you look at salary for the most part, if you just look down the salary list, it's for the most part by ADP. The earlier guys are being priced up, and then so on down. But then you'll just have a guy. I want to say it was like Michael Pittman last year, or maybe it was like 2 years ago, where like this guy was like
last year, I think.
Yeah, it was like a 3rd round pick, and then he's priced way down in like the wide receiver like 40s or something. So there's always a handful of those guys that just scream out that their price just isn't reflective of their ADP and the guys they're next to. But again, I'd have to look through salary, which I've been trying to hold off. I think this is probably the week that I'll try and open it up and actually start digging into it. So
I think McConkey at 4,700, it was one of the first ones that stood out for like the exact same reason that you just mentioned with Pittman. I think it's just, it's the same exact situation, just he's a few rounds later and a few $100s cheaper. Actually, I remember Pittman being 5,500. I think it was 2 years ago.
That was the exact price. And he smashed too, by the way.
Yeah, he did. McConkey, 4,700. Not as many in the running back position, although Chase Brown, 5,000. Yes, it's a tough matchup with New England, but he's somebody who, like, when pricing came out, he was being drafted around 130. Now he's being drafted around 90, 95 in some drafts. So,
and he's just a community guy too. Like everyone just loves to love Chase Brown. So
yeah, and to your point, Sam Darnold, when pricing came out, we thought JJ McCarthy might be starting week 1. So Darnold definitely underpriced as well. If you were going Darnold, would it just be with Justin Jefferson, or are you trying to double stack there?
Yeah, it would probably. If I was playing Justin Jefferson, it would definitely just be Justin Jefferson. I am kind of intrigued where for Jordan Addison, I don't like Jordan Addison like really at all. I think his ADP has fallen recently, so I think like he's fine now, whatever. But he just ran so pure on touchdown, so he's not a guy that I was really considering at all. But Jalen Naylor is stone min, so I think he's just a guy that would just make everything work. But then again, you're playing Darnold because you don't have to punt anywhere else. So that's kind of something that I have to think about. But yeah, it is also hard just because Justin Jefferson's another guy that I've been pretty light on too, just because I preferred Amon-Ra St. Brown over Jefferson the entire draft season. And that just flipped this week, which is kind of weird because I personally like Jefferson more because of Darnold. I'd want to hear your thoughts about it as well, just because first off, I do expect this to be the pass-heavy offense that we have seen under KOC. I'm not going to copy and paste. Like it's just egregious copy and pasting the Nick Mullins to this version of the Minnesota Vikings. Like that's not going to happen. But I think it is going to be the same philosophical mindset that KOC is going to have throughout the season. I am optimistic that Darnold is going to do well. But regardless, I did think that he was going to take a step back with JJ McCarthy. Not only him being a rookie, but he's a rookie, just so raw, just did not have to throw the ball at all at Michigan. And I'm not going to say he's good or bad, but we just have no idea. You just can't have him drop back 45 times his first couple games in the league. But with Darnold, I think he actually can. So I am optimistic that we're just going to get the green light right from the jump with Darnold. So that is one that I like a lot. And so, yeah, I mean, like I said, I've been lower on Jefferson throughout the offseason. Now I'd say I'm in line with the market just because Amon-Ra did flip him now. But I don't think the Darnold to JJ should have like changed your mindset on Jefferson because like I said, I personally like him more. I think there is gonna be a lot of pass volume, and so yeah, I think if I were to do a Minnesota stack, it would most likely be Jefferson because I don't feel great about playing Darnold, but I don't want to punt with the Darnold quarterback. So probably just a single stack there.
I think the biggest obstacle for me using Jefferson is that I think Tyreek Hill at $8,700 is just phenomenal.
I would have to play both. I would definitely play both.
Yeah. Which I think brings me to the stack that I'm eyeing the most for week one, I think is probably Buffalo, in large part just because look at the quarterbacks that are on this slate. You don't have Lamar Jackson. You don't have Jalen Hurts. You don't have Patrick Mahomes. So the separation between the top quarterback and the second best quarterback on this slate is as wide as it's going to be, perhaps all season, just in terms of the top scorer versus the second highest scorer on their projections. Now, maybe you are super high on CJ Stroud. Maybe you think that Anthony Richardson is maybe the second best quarterback, but priced all the way down at 6,300. So there are certainly arguments for other guys, but man, I look at that and I just see a lot of separation in what's going to be projected for Josh Allen and CJ Stroud and Dak Prescott and Tua are third and fourth most expensive. Like we're not going to see that kind of separation at the top very often in slates. So Allen has a ton of interest from me. The problem though is we would need a little bit more clarity on who exactly is healthy, who exactly isn't on Buffalo, and what that receiver rotation might look like, which again, we should have for week one. So that's probably why I'm eyeing Allen. But in order to do that, I'd have to make sure that I'm able to use Allen and Tyreek because I don't think that I'm going to be willing to sacrifice Tyreek from my lineup.
Well, I mean, I'm just going to say one of my biggest GPP wins was in a large field. I forget which contest it was. Might have been it wasn't the power suite, but it was one of those $100 three maxes. But I think it was 2 years ago. I onslaughted the Bucks versus Bills game. If you remember that game, Chris Godwin went off, Tom Brady went off. Josh Allen ran for like 100-something yards and rushed for, I think, 1 or 2 touchdowns. I didn't have a single Bill with him. Completely onslaughted the Bucs. I think I played Leonard Fournette, Chris Godwin. I don't think I played Mike Evans. Didn't bring a single Buffalo pass catcher because Diggs was the only one you felt good about. And he was pretty high priced, and he just didn't fit in Allen build. Completely rolled him out naked, and it won. So, I mean, naked Josh Allen is completely viable in large field and small field. So I think that you can roll with that. So
we are still stuck at 6 entrants. So I think what we'll do, Sam, unless you have any final strategy tidbits that you want to get off your chest, I think what we'll do is we'll stop the stream here. We will post this show as just a strategy show, and then we'll try to come back either later tonight when this contest is filling, or maybe I'll just withdraw from the contest so we can find a new time to do it live. And for that one, we'll probably sign up ahead of time. Maybe we'll just figure out exactly what time most people are drafting, so it's most likely to fill more quickly. But any final thoughts before we jump off?
No final thoughts. All my best ball stuff is on the FTN fantasy site. I have a best ball article that comes out every Saturday and Sunday. So yeah, be sure to look through those. I'm pretty transparent. Like all my exposures, like you'll see these guys that I have massive bags on. They'll appear in all these articles. Rico Dowdle, Zeke Elliott. I mean, these guys are in my articles constantly. And when you can see, when the best ball exposures comes out, I think they release it on week 1. Like you'll notice, like you look at my articles and my exposures, like they're completely in sync. I'm completely transparent about every guy I'm clicking in every draft. So yeah, there's still time to enter these best ball drafts, and you can go through those and see exactly who I'm drafting. So yeah, feel free to check those out.
And that's exactly how all our DFS content is. So if you have interest in any subscription at FTN, whether it's just fantasy football, whether it's DFS, whether it's betting, or a mix of all of them with a VIP package, code FTN15 will get you 15% off. I don't know exactly how long this code is going to last. I think it's going to last at least through tomorrow, Friday, maybe even through this weekend, but that could change at any moment. So make sure you jump in as soon as possible and take advantage. So with that, we will catch you next time, hopefully, maybe even later tonight, to actually do this live draft. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.